The gavel cracked down so hard it sounded like a gunshot. "Get this man out of my courtroom," Judge Harold Whitfield snapped, pointing a trembling finger toward the back wall. "Look at him. Standing there with his mop like he owns the place. Do you know where you are, boy?" The courtroom went silent. 60 people froze in their seats. Marcus Webb stood near the side door, gray overalls damp with cleaning solution, a mop handle resting against his shoulder. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He simply lowered his eyes to the marble floor he had polished 1,000 times before. Laughter broke out from the front row. A young lawyer covered his smirk with a manila folder. Someone in the gallery whispered, "Why's the judge so mad at the janitor?" But Marcus Webb wasn't just a janitor. 20 years ago, Marcus had stood in a different kind of chaos, smoke, screaming, fire eating through metal, and he had pulled someone from the wreckage with his bare hands. That someone was lying in a hospital bed that night, alive only because Marcus refused to let go. That someone was Judge Whitfield's son. And the judge had no idea. What happens when the man you humiliate is the very man who saved everything you love? Today, in this courtroom, that truth was about to surface, and nothing would ever be the same. Marcus Webb arrived at the Hollis County Courthouse every morning at 5:30 a.m., long before the lawyers in their pressed suits, long before the clerks with their coffee cups, long before anyone else even thought about unlocking the front doors. He liked the quiet. The empty halls. The way sunlight crept through the tall windows and lit up the marble floors like gold before the noise of the day began. For 20 years, this building had been his world. He knew every creak in the hinges, every water stain on the ceiling tiles, every name carved into the donor plaques nobody ever read. He knew which judges said, "Good morning," and which ones pretended he was invisible. Most pretended. Marcus didn't mind, or at least, he told himself he didn't. He had learned long ago that some people only see what they want to see. To them, a black man in gray overalls pushing a cleaning cart was furniture. Background. Part of the building, not a person in it. But Marcus carried a story none of them knew. Before the mop, before the overalls, before the quiet halls of Hollis County Courthouse, Marcus Webb had worn a different uniform. He had served 2 tours overseas as a combat medic, the kind of work that doesn't make headlines but saves lives in the dark, in the chaos, when there's no time to be afraid. He came home with medals he kept in a shoebox under his bed. He never talked about them. Not to his neighbors, not to his pastor, not even to his daughter, Imani, who was now finishing her 2nd year of law school on a scholarship Marcus had worked overtime for years to help fund. "Why don't you tell people, Daddy?" Imani had asked him once, holding up one of his medals, eyes wide with pride. "You did something incredible." Marcus had just smiled and put the medal back in its box. "Telling people doesn't make it more true, baby. It already happened. That's enough for me." That was Marcus. Quiet. Steady. A man who believed actions spoke louder than any ribbon or headline ever could. But what nobody in that courthouse knew, what nobody could have guessed, was that one of those actions, one moment from years ago, had reached further into that building than anyone imagined. 8 years earlier, on a rain-soaked highway 40 miles outside the city, a car had flipped and burst into flames after a truck lost control. Marcus, off duty and driving home from a late shift, was the first one there. While other cars slowed down to watch, Marcus stopped his truck, ran straight into the wreckage, and pulled a teenage boy out through a shattered window seconds before the entire vehicle was swallowed by fire. The boy's name was Daniel Whitfield. Judge Harold Whitfield's only son. Marcus never knew the boy's last name. He never asked. He simply drove him to the hospital, made sure paramedics took over, and disappeared into the night before anyone could even get his name. The story made local news for a single day: mystery man saves local teen from fiery crash. After that, it faded. Marcus never followed up. He never went looking for thanks. He had no idea the boy he saved was the son of a judge. And the judge, busy burying himself in court cases, convincing himself the world owed him deference, never learned the rescuer's name either. Two strangers, bound by one impossible night, walking the same marble halls for years, never recognizing each other. Until one Tuesday morning changed everything. The courtroom was unusually full that day. A high-profile fraud case had drawn local reporters, a handful of curious students, and several attorneys hoping to watch the famous Judge Whitfield in action. Whitfield was known for two things: his sharp legal mind, and his sharper tongue. Lawyers feared his rulings. Clerks feared his moods. And courthouse staff, especially the maintenance crew, avoided him whenever possible. That morning, the air conditioning had malfunctioned, leaving the courtroom uncomfortably warm. Marcus had been called in early to fix a flickering light fixture near the judge's bench, a routine job he had done dozens of times before. He worked quietly, balanced on a small stepladder, hoping to finish before the session began. He didn't finish in time. Judge Whitfield entered the courtroom sharp at 9 a.m., robe snapping behind him, his face already tight with irritation from the heat. He stopped mid-stride when he saw Marcus on the ladder near his bench. "What is this?" Whitfield said loudly, scanning the room as if searching for someone to blame. "Why is there a janitor standing in my courtroom while court is in session?" Marcus stepped down quickly. "Sorry, Your Honor. Just finishing the light. I'll be out in." "I didn't ask for an explanation," Whitfield snapped. "I asked why you're still standing here." The room had gone quiet, the kind of quiet that makes everyone lean forward just slightly, sensing something uncomfortable is about to happen. Marcus picked up his toolbox, keeping his eyes low. "Yes, sir. Leaving now." But Whitfield wasn't finished. "Look at this," the judge said, turning toward the gallery with a smirk, gesturing at Marcus's gray overalls stained with years of work. "This is what happens when people don't apply themselves. Pushing mops their whole lives instead of bettering themselves. Some people are just built for one thing." A ripple of nervous laughter spread through the room. A young attorney in the front row chuckled behind his folder. Someone in the gallery murmured something Marcus couldn't quite hear, but he didn't need to. He had heard versions of this before. "Do you even know where you are, boy?" Whitfield continued, his voice rising with each word, feeding off the attention. "This is a court of law. A place of intelligence, of discipline. Not someplace for the help to wander around gawking." More laughter. Marcus's jaw tightened, but his face remained still, calm, unreadable. 20 years of swallowing moments like this had taught him how to keep walking even when every word landed like a blow. He said nothing. He simply turned, toolbox in hand, mop resting against his shoulder, and walked toward the side door, the laughter chasing him out like a current pulling at his back. But what no one in that room knew yet was that the silence Marcus carried wasn't weakness. It was restraint. Because Marcus Webb could have said something that would have changed the entire mood of that room in an instant. He could have mentioned a rainy night, a burning car, a teenage boy gasping for air. He said nothing. Not yet. But word of the humiliation spread through the courthouse by lunchtime, whispered in hallways, repeated in the break room, reaching ears Marcus never expected. Including the ears of someone who had once owed Marcus a debt neither of them knew existed. By early afternoon, the story had transformed, as stories do, gathering details and losing accuracy with each retelling. Some said the judge had thrown Marcus's toolbox across the room. Others said Marcus had nearly been fired on the spot. Patricia Alvarez, a court clerk who had worked alongside Marcus for nearly 15 years, found him in the break room during his lunch break, quietly eating a sandwich at the corner table, exactly the way he always did. "Marcus, are you okay?" she asked, sliding into the seat across from him. "I heard what happened in there." Marcus shrugged, not looking up. "Heard wrong probably. Wasn't a big deal." "Wasn't a big deal?" Patricia's voice tightened. "He humiliated you in front of 60 people, Marcus. That man has no idea who he's talking to. Marcus gave a tired smile. He's talking to a janitor, Pat. That's all he sees. That's all most people see. Patricia studied him for a long moment, frustration and sadness mixing in her expression. She had always sensed there was more to Marcus than the quiet man who emptied trash cans and fixed flickering lights, but she had never pushed him to explain. You ever think about telling people who you really are? She asked softly. What you did before this job? Marcus folded his napkin carefully, the way he did everything, deliberate, unhurried. Telling people doesn't change what already happened. And it sure won't change a man like Whitfield. But what neither of them realized was that the wheels of fate had already begun turning. Because that same afternoon, in a private office on the third floor, Judge Whitfield's adult son Daniel was visiting his father, carrying paperwork related to a charity gala the family sponsored every year, an event honoring first responders and community heroes. As Daniel waited outside his father's chambers, he overheard two clerks gossiping near the water cooler about the morning's incident. Mocked him right there in front of everyone, one clerk was saying. Poor man didn't even fight back. Just took it and left. Who? Daniel asked, stepping closer, curiosity pulling at him. Marcus. The janitor, the clerk replied. Your dad really let him have it this morning. Daniel froze. Marcus. It wasn't an uncommon name. It could have meant nothing. But something about the way the clerk said it, something about the timing, the description, gray overalls, quiet demeanor, steady hands, stirred a memory buried deep in Daniel's mind. A memory from 8 years ago that still visited him in nightmares sometimes. Twisted metal. Flames licking at broken glass. A stranger's hands pulling him free just before everything went up in fire. He had never learned that stranger's name. But what if, after all these years, that stranger had been here all along? What happened next would unravel secrets buried far deeper than anyone in that courthouse could have imagined. Daniel Whitfield had spent 8 years trying to remember details from a night his mind had mostly erased out of self-protection. He remembered the screech of tires. He remembered the world flipping upside down. He remembered heat, suffocating heat, and smoke filling his lungs. And he remembered a voice. Calm. Steady. Cutting through the chaos like an anchor in a storm. Stay with me, son. I've got you. Just breathe. He remembered strong hands pulling him through broken glass, ignoring the flames licking closer, ignoring the danger to himself entirely. He remembered being placed gently on the wet pavement, the stranger checking his pulse, applying pressure to a wound on his leg with practiced precision. Then sirens. Then darkness. By the time Daniel woke up in the hospital, his rescuer was gone. No name. No face anyone could fully describe except a black man, maybe in his late 30s, calm under pressure, gone before police arrived. Daniel's father had tried to find the man through news coverage, through police reports, through every available channel. The search led nowhere. Eventually, the trail went cold, and life moved forward the way it does, even when gratitude remains unfinished. But now, standing outside his father's chambers, Daniel felt that unfinished gratitude rushing back all at once. He needed to see this janitor. He needed to know if Marcus Webb was the man who had saved his life. Daniel found Marcus near the east wing, restocking a supply closet, his movements calm and methodical despite the morning's humiliation. Excuse me, Daniel said, his voice unsteady. Are you Marcus Webb? Marcus turned, surprised to see a well-dressed young man addressing him so directly. Most visitors walked past without acknowledgement. Yes sir, that's me, Marcus answered. Can I help you with something? Daniel studied his face carefully, searching for something familiar in features blurred by years and trauma. Did you, 8 years ago, on Route 9, was there an accident? A car fire? Marcus's expression shifted slightly, a flicker of memory crossing his calm features. There was. Long time ago now. Daniel's breath caught. You pulled someone out. A teenager. Marcus nodded slowly, unsure where this conversation was heading. I did what anyone should have done. That was me, Daniel said, his voice breaking. You saved my life. The supply closet fell silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights overhead. Marcus stared at the young man in front of him, pieces clicking into place, the resemblance, faint but undeniable, the same eyes he remembered glancing up at him through smoke and panic all those years ago. You're that boy. Marcus whispered. Daniel nodded, tears welling in his eyes. I've looked for you for years. Nobody knew your name. And you've been working here this whole time. Marcus swallowed hard, overwhelmed by a memory he had buried beneath 2 decades of quiet routine. Didn't think it mattered who I was. Just mattered that you made it. But what neither man realized in that moment was the storm quietly gathering above them. Because Daniel Whitfield wasn't just anyone. He was Judge Harold Whitfield's son. And that fact was about to collide with the morning's humiliation in ways neither Marcus nor the judge could yet imagine. That evening, Daniel sat across from his father in the family's quiet study, the weight of his discovery pressing on his chest like a stone he couldn't put down. Dad, I need to tell you something, Daniel began carefully. The accident 8 years ago. I found the man who saved me. Judge Whitfield looked up from his paperwork, surprise flickering across his face. You're joking. After all this time. He's not joking, and you're not going to believe where he's been, Daniel said, his voice tightening. He works at your courthouse, Dad. He's a janitor there. His name is Marcus Webb. The room went still. Whitfield's pen slipped from his fingers, clattering softly against the desk. Marcus Webb. You humiliated him this morning, Daniel said, anger creeping into his tone now. In front of the whole courtroom. Everyone's talking about it. Whitfield's face drained of color as memories of the morning rushed back, the man on the ladder, the mocking words he had thrown so easily, the laughter he had encouraged from the gallery. That can't be, Whitfield muttered, almost to himself. There's no way. It's him, Dad, Daniel insisted. I talked to him myself. He remembered everything. The crash. Pulling me out. All of it. Whitfield sat frozen, his mind racing through the events of the day, replaying his own cruel words with a horror that twisted his stomach. He had spent years searching for the man who saved his son, vowing to honor him properly if he was ever found. And instead, when fate finally placed that man directly in front of him, he had mocked him in front of an entire courtroom. But what Whitfield didn't yet know was that this revelation, devastating as it felt, was only the beginning. Because somewhere in the courthouse archives, buried in old personnel files rarely touched, lay records connecting Marcus Webb to something even larger than a single rescue, records detailing a military commendation, a Silver Star Marcus had quietly tucked away, never mentioned in any job application, never discussed with coworkers. A file that, once opened, would reveal exactly who Marcus Webb truly was. And exactly how badly Judge Whitfield had misjudged him. The next morning, Judge Whitfield arrived at the courthouse earlier than usual, his stomach tight with dread and determination. He found Marcus in the east hallway, exactly where Daniel said he would be, pushing his familiar cleaning cart toward the supply room. Mr. Webb, Whitfield said, his voice uncharacteristically gentle. Could I speak with you for a moment? Marcus turned, cautious but composed. Yes, Your Honor. Whitfield hesitated, searching for words he rarely needed in his line of work. I owe you an apology. A real one. My son told me what happened 8 years ago. What you did for him. Marcus's expression remained calm, though something flickered behind his eyes. Wasn't looking for thanks, sir. Just glad he made it home safe. I humiliated you, Whitfield continued, his voice tightening with genuine shame. In front of everyone. And you saved my son's life, and I had no idea. For a moment, it seemed like everything might resolve simply, cleanly, an apology offered, accepted, the story ending with quiet dignity restored. Whitfield even arranged for Marcus to be formally recognized at the next staff meeting, drafting a short statement praising his courage and service. Word spread quickly through the courthouse. Patricia smiled with relief when she heard. Daniel felt a weight lift from his chest, grateful his father was finally making things right. It seemed, for a brief moment, like justice had found its way home. But what nobody realized yet was that this resolution was far too simple, far too convenient. Because someone else in that courthouse had overheard the apology, and that person had no interest in seeing a janitor receive any kind of recognition that might overshadow their own ambitions. That person was about to make sure this story took a darker turn. Assistant District Attorney Russell Cobb had been quietly building his political career inside Hollis County for nearly a decade, hoping Judge Whitfield's eventual retirement would clear his path toward higher office. Public attention, especially attention involving emotional stories of heroism and redemption, threatened the careful image Cobb had constructed of himself as the courthouse's most capable, most controlled rising star. When Cobb learned that the judge planned to publicly honor a janitor at the next staff meeting, framing himself as compassionate and self-aware after his earlier outburst, jealousy curdled into something far more calculated. That afternoon, Cobb requested an old personnel file from records, claiming routine background verification for security clearance updates. Buried inside Marcus's file, he found something unexpected, a redacted note referencing a military disciplinary review from years earlier, details vague but suggestive. Cobb saw opportunity. By the next morning, rumors began circulating through the courthouse, carefully planted, carefully vague. Whispers suggested Marcus's military record wasn't as clean as people assumed. Someone mentioned an investigation. Someone mentioned discharge complications. The story shifted instantly. Patricia found Marcus near the break room, her face tight with concern. "Marcus, people are saying things about your service record. Is there something you need to explain?" Marcus's calm expression cracked slightly, replaced by something heavier, more guarded. "There's history there, Pat. Complicated history. Not something I talk about." "People are saying you were dishonorably discharged," Patricia pressed gently. "That maybe the whole hero story isn't what it seems." Marcus's jaw tightened. "It's not that simple." Within hours, Whitfield's planned recognition ceremony was quietly cancelled, the judge suddenly hesitant, uncertain if honoring Marcus publicly might expose him to embarrassment if the rumors carried any truth. Marcus, sensing the shift, said nothing in his own defense. Old habits, old wounds, made silence feel safer than explanation. But what nobody yet understood was that the supposed disciplinary review buried in his file wasn't what it seemed. And the truth, once uncovered, would change everything, not just for Marcus, but for the man who had tried to bury it. Monty Webb arrived at the courthouse late one evening, having heard secondhand about the swirling rumors threatening her father's reputation. Furious and protective, she requested access to military archive records through her law school's veteran outreach program, determined to uncover the truth herself. What she found stunned her. The disciplinary review mentioned in whispers wasn't a mark against her father at all. It was the opposite. Marcus had been investigated, briefly, after refusing direct orders during a chaotic evacuation overseas, orders that would have left wounded soldiers behind enemy lines. Marcus disobeyed, risking his own career and safety, to carry 3 injured men to safety himself. The investigation, completed months later, fully cleared him. Not only cleared him, but resulted in a formal commendation, the Silver Star, awarded for extraordinary heroism under fire. Marcus had never mentioned it to anyone. Not out of shame, but humility, the same humility that kept him quiet about saving Daniel's life years later. Imani brought the document straight to Patricia, her hands trembling with a mixture of pride and anger. "They twisted everything," Imani said, voice shaking. "My father didn't do anything wrong. He saved people. He always saves people. And now someone's trying to destroy him over it." Patricia stared at the documents, eyes widening with understanding. Cobb. This has to be Cobb. He's been pushing this story since yesterday. But before they could decide what to do next, news spread that an emergency hearing had been called the following morning, requested anonymously, questioning Marcus's continued employment at the courthouse based on newly surfaced concerns about his background. The setup was clear. Someone wanted Marcus gone, publicly, permanently, before the truth had a chance to surface. What happened in that courtroom the next day would determine far more than just one man's job. It would reveal exactly who deserved respect, and who had spent years pretending to deserve it instead. The courtroom was packed again the next morning, word of the strange emergency hearing pulling in curious staff, reporters, and onlookers eager to see how the story would unfold. Judge Whitfield sat uneasily at his bench, Cobb standing confidently at the prosecution table, ready to present his manufactured concerns. Marcus stood quietly near the back, Imani and Patricia seated nearby, tension thick in the air. Your Honor, Cobb began smoothly, given recent revelations about Mr. Webb's military history, the courthouse has a responsibility to review his continued employment, particularly given his unsupervised access to sensitive areas of this building. Whitfield's expression remained carefully neutral, though guilt flickered behind his eyes. Proceed. Before Cobb could continue, Imani stood abruptly. Your Honor, may I address the court? I have documentation directly relevant to this hearing. Whitfield hesitated, then nodded. Go ahead. Imani walked forward, placing certified military records on the clerk's desk. These are my father's actual service records, obtained through official channels. They show Marcus Webb wasn't disciplined for misconduct. He was investigated after refusing to abandon wounded soldiers, an act of courage that led to a full Silver Star commendation. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Cobb's confident expression faltered. Those documents weren't verified through proper. They're certified copies, Mr. Cobb, Imani interrupted, voice steady and sharp. Exactly like the partial, redacted version you used to spread rumors without context. Whitfield's gaze shifted toward Marcus, standing silently at the back of the room, the same way he had stood the day of his humiliation. Mr. Webb, Whitfield said slowly, is this true? Marcus stepped forward, voice calm but firm. It's true, Your Honor. I did what I believed was right. Same as I did pulling your son out of that car 8 years ago. Same as I do every morning, cleaning these halls so this courthouse looks the way justice is supposed to look. The room fell completely silent. Whitfield's hands trembled slightly against his bench. You saved my son's life, and 3 days ago, I mocked you in front of this entire courtroom. You didn't know, Marcus replied quietly. But that's the problem, isn't it? Nobody bothers to know. Cobb, sensing his plan collapsing, tried one final attempt. Your Honor, regardless of his military record, the man's employment status should still be. Enough, Mr. Cobb, Whitfield snapped, anger finally directed where it belonged. This hearing is over. And frankly, I think it's time we discuss exactly why you manufactured this entire situation. Gasps turned into murmurs of shock as the courtroom realized the true architect behind the controversy. What happened next would ensure that, for the first time in 20 years, Marcus Webb's story would finally be seen clearly by everyone in that building. Within days, an internal investigation confirmed what Imani's documents had already proven. Cobb had deliberately manipulated incomplete records to damage Marcus's reputation, motivated by personal ambition and jealousy disguised as procedural concern. Cobb resigned quietly before formal disciplinary action could remove him, his political ambitions extinguished by his own deception. Judge Whitfield, meanwhile, faced his own reckoning, not through punishment, but through reflection. He requested a formal courthouse-wide meeting, something unprecedented in his career. Standing before the same courtroom where he had humiliated Marcus days earlier, Whitfield spoke with unusual humility. 3 days ago, I mocked a man in this room because of what I assumed about him, Whitfield said, his voice steady despite visible emotion. I judged him by his uniform instead of his character. That man saved my son's life 8 years ago, asking nothing in return. He has shown more courage and integrity in silence than I have shown in years of speaking loudly from this bench. He turned toward Marcus, standing near the back exactly where he always stood. "Mr. Webb, would you come forward, please?" Marcus hesitated, then walked slowly toward the front of the courtroom, the same walk he had made hundreds of times pushing his cart, except this time, every eye watched him with something other than indifference. "This courthouse owes you more than an apology," Whitfield continued. "It owes you recognition long overdue." He presented Marcus with an official commendation, formally honoring his military service and his quiet heroism within the courthouse community. Applause filled the room, genuine and overwhelming, completely different from the laughter that had echoed through those same walls just days before. Patricia wiped tears from her eyes. Daniel stood near the doorway, watching with quiet pride. Imani squeezed her father's hand as he accepted the recognition with the same calm humility he carried through everything. "I didn't do any of it for this," Marcus said quietly, addressing the room. "I did it because it was right. That's all it ever needs to be." But what made this moment most powerful wasn't the recognition itself. It was the lesson rippling through every person who had once looked past Marcus without truly seeing him. 6 months later, the Hollis County Courthouse looked the same on the surface, the same marble floors, the same tall windows, the same quiet hum of daily proceedings. But something fundamental had shifted within its walls. Marcus still arrived at 5:30 every morning. He still pushed his cart down familiar hallways, still polished the same floors he had cared for over 20 years. But now, judges nodded when they passed him. Clerks asked about his day. Young attorneys, humbled by the story that had spread throughout the legal community, greeted him by name. Judge Whitfield had changed too, in ways deeper than public apology. He established a courthouse mentorship program, encouraging staff to look beyond appearances, beyond assumptions, beyond the surface details people use to measure worth. Imani, inspired by everything that happened, dedicated her upcoming legal career to advocating for overlooked workers and unrecognized heroes within institutional systems. Marcus never sought praise. He never wanted his story turned into anything bigger than what it was, a man who showed up, did what was right, and let his actions speak quietly across decades. But sometimes, late in the evening, after the courthouse emptied and silence returned to the marble halls, Marcus would pause near the same spot where Whitfield had once humiliated him. He would look around at the empty room, remembering both the laughter that once echoed there and the standing applause that eventually replaced it. And he would think about something his daughter once asked him. "Why don't you tell people, Daddy?" Now, walking through those halls, greeted with respect instead of indifference, Marcus finally understood the answer to a question he never needed answered before. Sometimes the truth doesn't need to be spoken. Sometimes it just needs time, patience, and the courage to remain quietly, steadily yourself, until the world finally catches up to see what was always there.